Hello, everybody, and welcome to the event. We will begin in one moment.
Hello and welcome to ATARC's webinar series. Today, topic experts will share strategies that agencies can implement to alleviate the concern of the unknown and make operations more efficient. My name is Kirsten Patton, and I'll be moderating today's panel. ATARC stands for the Advanced Technology Academic Research Center, and it is a nonprofit that facilitates collaboration through on-site interaction, learning, and market research. We provide ongoing opportunities for cross-agency collaboration throughout the government, industry, and academia. I would like to welcome all of our attendees, and a special thanks to Farah Alam and the entire CloudBees team. This afternoon, we're going to hear from our panelists, followed by a Q&A where we'll have a few poll questions and we'll answer all of your audience questions. Before we begin, I just want to encourage you to submit the questions that you have in the Q&A section of this platform, and be sure to respond to the polls if you'd like to receive your CPE credit. So to kick things off, we're going to begin with a round of introductions. I see all of our panelists are on camera now, which is great. Ian, could you please start us off with intros?
Yes, are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. So my name is Ian Anderson. I'm a lead DevSecOps engineer with the U.S. Navy at Naval Surface Warfare Center Dahlgren. I specifically work with a group called the Naval Systems Engineering Resource Center, or NSERC, which is a cloud and service provider at NSWC Dahlgren. What's interesting with Dahlgren is it's a working capital fund, so we not only get to provide services to NSWC Dahlgren, not only the Navy, but all federal services, as long as the funding lines are able to transfer over. So we're in a very unique position to where we not only get to help the Navy with a lot of its cloud efforts, digital transformation efforts, but other federal services and, kind of that cross collaboration between the different services, especially within the DoD, between the Navy, Army, Marine Corps, Air Force. So specifically, we're now working towards, providing those enterprise services. And as, the DoD as a whole moves towards a lot of these new policies coming out with the executive order, cybersecurity executive order, RAISE 2.0, how can we better align and better serve our customers and continue to get products out faster, more secure, more efficiently.
Thanks, Ian. Let's jump to Ida next, please.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes. My name is Ida Mix, and I am the Chief Information Security Officer and Director of Network Operations at the Bureau of Industry and Security. This bureau is within the Department of Commerce. I've been working in this with Commerce for about 12 years. I started work as a telecommunications network programmer, so it's been quite a journey to being over security. Some of my prior companies I worked at was America Online and also IBM. And within Commerce is the only federated agency within the federal space. So some of the implementations of the Zero Trust Administration's strategic directive there's pluses and minuses because we all have divergent missions as we try to make sure that we are fulfilling our mission, but also trying to march to the directions of the Zero Trust within our organization.
Thanks, Ida. Let's jump to Stephen next.
Hey, good afternoon, and thanks for having me. My name is Steve Barney. I work for the Department of Treasury in the Bureau that you all know fondly as the Internal Revenue Service. I am the Associate Director for Architecture and the Architecture and Engineering Advisory Branch under the Directorate of Architecture and Implementation. My biggest task right now is to get us to done on the continuous diagnostics and mitigation program and defend. So I'm very active, very proactive in pursuing that North Star to getting to done. I think that's very important to the agency. And within those efforts, I am tasked with shepherding the data at rest and data in transit activities. And it's an interesting thing because the IRS, as I think you all probably know, it's a very large agency. It's an old agency. The infrastructure is quite old. I mean, we're still running, mainframe COBOL program things. And so when we start looking at DARE and different programs like that, it's kind of an interesting challenge with several 100,000 endpoints and basically about 1 million events a day. So it's an interesting challenge. I enjoy it, and I look forward to this activity this afternoon and expanding my knowledge pore a little bit. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thanks, Steve. Trevor, let's hear from you next.
Sure, thank you. How is my volume?
Sounds good.
Cool. So my name is Trevor Bryant. I am a cybersecurity specialist within CISA in the cybersecurity division on a program called .gov, which is the top level domain. So when an agency or a partner requests a .gov, it comes through us and we facilitate and approve or reject or go through the motion there. To talk a little bit about that program and where I fit into that program. With everything that had pivoted to more online services and the internet playing a more crucial or critical role in our lives, Congress had recognized the value of operating the .gov program from a security-centric background and had passed the .gov Act of 2020. And this moved the top-level domain to my organization, Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency. And so with this move, we've sort of had the opportunity to decouple a monolithic system to more sort of a modular services approach. And we've taken this approach to not just modernize the way we develop our software, but also take an opportunity to pathfind an approach to modernizing how we achieve authorization as well. And so this ultimately helps support our registrants, those that manage their domains, by giving them an improved experience on their end, but also giving those of us that manage the program and do the back end administration a better experience as well. And this, I was thinking about this a little bit earlier, but this sort of supports the thinking that any site obtaining a .gov domain has the potential to go through a continuous ATO process as well, since there's some part that is going to be internet facing and therefore some component of it would actually benefit from a DevSecOps approach. And to promote the branch I'm in a newer branch within CISA in CSD called Capacity Building. And that's where our .gov program lives. And so our mission is to expand upon the capacity, pun intended, in which we're supporting our customers through both not just the technical means, but also the non-technical means. And with that, our vision is to equip the public and private sectors to manage these cybersecurity risks, but also have the resiliency and mitigations available to overcome what their challenges and burdens may be. And I came to be here because I started my career as an auditor and then an assessor. And I had always thought if we could take an approach of achieving knowledge by automation, we can better understand the technologies and the processes that we do need to automate. Because we are generally 60, 70, 80% there with software, like so close to that achievable 90-ish% mark, but our documentation often lags behind. So what are we doing, or how can we rethink the way that we're achieving our continuous authorizations without our documentation having to lag behind?
Yeah, thank you. Lanye, let's hear from you next.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Lanye Ford. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Arlo Solutions. I've been supporting DoD in one way or another for about 20 years. I guess that makes me sound kind of old, but I started in the Air Force at the help desk. So literally started from the bottom, and that's no offense to the folks that's working the help desk. And I've done sysadmin, wire dog. I pull cable through buildings. And I always say I started in cyber before it was sexy. So my focus has always been around governance, risk, and compliance. Specifically around assess and authorize and using now the NIST framework. But in the DoD, I started with from DISCAP to DICAP to RMF. So I've been around assess and authorize for quite some time. I supported DISA, writing the connection approval guide for the first multi-function switches. So I've done it for telephony, assess and authorize out with satellite-based systems. So again, been around this space for a while. My company specifically focuses on ARLO Solutions, focus on program management, intel support, and cyber, all at the strategic level. So we support people like, you know, the DoD, the Principal Cyber Advisor's Office, looking at and helping draft things like the cybersecurity strategy. And we support DoD, like at the OSD level, all around, again, cyber strategy. We've also supported USDA, going in and again, looking at their RMF process and taking them through a prepare step and thinking through how do we streamline, not only streamline, but decrease, as Trevor's mentioned, that body of evidence. How do we decrease the amount of paperwork that we're using and try to automate the process as much as possible? And I'm a lover of framework. So what we do, some examples of some of the work we do within Arlo, like we're creating the strategy and framework for how you assess drones before going to GSA schedule. We support the Air Force Cloud and DevSecOps authorizing official building out his ecosystem. And that AO is the authorizing official for things like Platform One, Cloud One, Level Up. So all of those folks that's kind of going after that cATO and has a cATO. Now supporting things like the CDAO office as we look at artificial intelligence and big data. So what we do is like to focus on those kind of new technology and hard problems and how do you assess, authorize, and streamline. So again, super excited to be here and learn from these amazing panelists and share as much as I can. Thanks.
Yeah, love it. Thank you so much. And Tyler, let's hear from you.
Yep. Thank you so much, Kirsten. And thank you everybody for joining. My name is Tyler Johnson. I'm the federal CTO here at CloudBees. For you who aren't super familiar with CloudBees, we're a DevSecOps and automation company. Our heritage is in open source Jenkins. We're the creators and maintainers of that project. And then we've expanded into the realm of feature-based development with rollout and flagging, release orchestration, and continuous monitoring, especially as it maps to RMF. I get the privilege as the Fed CTO here to oversee and interact with many of our federal customers and prospects and groups like the folks you see here today across DoD, the intelligence community, and civilian. So I've been doing this for almost 10 years now at this point, and I really, really appreciate the time and the opportunity to learn more about what you all see as gaps in the current automation cycles supporting continuous ATO, and then really learning more about where you've also had tremendous successes in this space as well. So thank you.
Yeah, great. Thank you. So jumping right into it with our first question, given today's speed of battle and speed of software delivery, at what point does operational efficiency become an imperative for mission program success? And Trevor, I'd love to hear from you first on this. In other words, what will move the needle forward from manual approvals to trusting automated approvals, data collection, and reporting?
Oh, well, thank you for starting with me. I won't speak to the battle components, but I am comfortable speaking to the speed of software delivery pieces. This is a tough one. How to trust the automation that we want to achieve and have, and then also how do we move the needle? If you had asked me 3 or 4 years ago, I would have said that we need policies in place to be able to support these so that we know how to appropriately request the budgets and define the requirements that we need. Today, I think we're there. I think we do have the supportive policies in place to be able to do the work that we need to do before we can get to the technical means of actually implementing the strategies and operational plans we've set forth. I'm going to talk a little bit about the user experience and the human-centered design pieces, because in the past, I have always ran into folks that did not want to have their name attached to a program or a project. And it took me a while to recognize that there's organizational trauma that can be associated with that, or those that are avoidant because there's some sort of organizational trauma. So an approach that we do like to take to move the needle is to take that human-centered design approach, where we want to work with and solve the problems with the people who depend on the solutions that we deliver, and have that customer experience where we're understanding the broader needs of not just the individuals, but the organization itself, and ultimately working to understand the context of which the service or the capability will be used. And I think bringing all of these three things together, that is not the same, but have overlapping qualities. We can work with our AOs, authorizing officials, and other leaders who want quality delivered faster, so that we can use these as a framework and incorporate them into our strategies and improve the overall experience to those that need to support the battle or the mission to better achieve what those objectives may be.
Thank you, Trevor. And whoever wants to jump in next, you guys can go ahead and just raise the hand icon. Otherwise, I'll call on you. Lanya, would you like to share any of your thoughts next?
Sure. I think, an area, and you'll hear me talk a lot about this in general, that I'm passionate about, is to move the needle forward, we have to have the right workforce. And unfortunately, that's not the case right now. The tools and the software and the automation options are truly endless at this point. But the issue is we focus, and I'm DOD focused when I give these examples, but we focus a lot on like tech refreshes and making sure that we're moving to the cloud and technology, but we don't refresh our workforce. And I think that when you start looking at the cybersecurity domain, we have to start looking at this a little different. Think if you're, if you're looking for a doctor, right, you're not going to go get a pediatrician to do open heart surgery. That's the same thing as cyber. It's such a multifaceted domain, and we continue to have these generalists around cyber. So we do have to find a way to, number one, upskill our workforce. If we're going to start going to, if our focus is cloud, now I'm talking on the cyber side, because on the DoD side, what you all have to think about is our workforce. We're typically used to getting this piece of equipment delivered to us. They bring it in a domain, and then we bolt on cybersecurity. And then all of a sudden, here comes cloud and DevSecOps. So all you old school cyber folks, and I'm considering myself one of them, that's accustomed to bolting security and assessing security at the end. Now you're supposed to magically understand, how do I get that? What is DevSecOps? What is coding? How do I ensure that I'm integrating that? And now how do I assess and authorize for that? And now what body of evidence should I provide the authorizing official for that? It's a tough space if you haven't been trained in that. So one, we need to upskill our workforce, and we have to, and I say we as the government, because I look at the government as the total force, so military, government, and contractors. But we have to understand that we have to put our money where our mouths are. The skill set out here, it costs for these folks. If you think about cyber as a multifaceted domain, which means if you want a cybersecurity expert that is, securing your cloud, guess what? They need to understand cloud, right? They need to understand hosting. And on top of that, you have to layer, they have to understand security and controls. And if you get the right type of people, they can help you crosswalk what these controls are saying and put it in the right speak for a developer to understand. And your developer can come back and say, oh, I see exactly what you need. I'm asking a developer for a PDF, right? And it's very frustrating for developers, right? But now if we have that open dialogue, so the second part of that is we have to have open dialogue. In the past, cybersecurity folks went over in this corner and we said, hey, this is the requirements that you all have to meet. That's not the case anymore, because we don't have the skill set to do it. So we have to tell them, this is the intent of what I want you to meet. Let's talk through how you can show me that you meet this. And then on top of that, we have to decide how can we depict this in a way that our senior leaders can make decisions. Okay, so now you want a CIO or a CISO or authorizing official to make a decision on, I don't comply with AC-1, right? And that's what we've done in the past. And a lot of times it's because we don't understand the intent. So it's a lot of things I think we have to do to move the meter forward. One is the workforce, and that goes to reskilling, making sure that we can retain and hire, which that's pay, and that's on the government side as well. And then I think we have to work on collaboration, right? For if we don't have that skill set, don't think that we're not going to know it all. Technology is changing too quickly. So pull down the egos and say, hey, I don't necessarily understand this, developer. Can you talk me through how you can, how you can depict how I secure, right? So hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, thank you. Let's go to Steve and then Tyler next.
Okay, I'm a little conflicted because at first I wanted to scaffold off what Trevor said, and then Lanya got off on one of my favorite topics, but I'm gonna stick with my original plan, right? So I want to tell you about something that we did here at the IRS, which was very uncharacteristic of us. We began a large program called Web Apps, and they decided the lifecycle methodology they were going to use is Agile, the Scrum method of Agile. No one in IRS had ever done a project using Agile. So I was assigned as the security guy to go stand up their security processes in this program. And when I got there, I realized nobody speaks this language in my world. Nobody in cybersecurity speaks Agile. They're waterfall people, they're plan maintenance people, they're O&M people. And so when I started looking at the processes that were necessary to deliver secure code and deliver secure capabilities, code scans took 10 days, and they wanted to do that after 6 weeks of writing code. The WBS for a FIPS 199 medium application was 120 days long. And I sat down with them, I said, that's not going to work for us. We have 2-week sprints, 3 2-week sprints, and at the end of that 6 weeks, we deploy production code to the taxpayer. I don't have time for all this, all of this compliance stuff and all this paper that's flying around. So a couple of things we did that were really kind of groundbreaking here at IRS. We established daily code scans. So I had about 27 Java code slingers working every day, and at night we ran app scan against that code, and then using Jenkins pipeline, some APIs that we developed, we sent the results of the code scan to that developer, not to their boss, not to me, not to the other developers, but to that person. The next morning they came in, opened their email. Last night I put too many backslashes on this line, I did this, I did that, I need to fix that, and then they went about their day coding. So I think you can appreciate now initially there was a little bit of, big brothers looking over my shoulder, and I don't know if I really like this, but after a couple of weeks, 2 or 3 weeks, the developers realized this isn't a gotcha. We're trying to help make you better coders. And so over time, when you can track this on the metrics that we had, where we would have like, a dozen highs, 3 dozen mediums, and a whole handful of lows, the severity and number of those defects in code decreased markedly and measurably over time. So that by the time we were about 3 months into this, now you've got these 3 federated delivery teams of coders competing with each other. I saw your code results. You had 3, mediums and 2 and 5 lows. We had no mediums and only 4 lows. You guys stink. And so this friendly competition eventually, resulted in some really, really good Java coders. And when I started thinking about the benefit to not just the individual, because they're basically in school every day, but to the organization, because when they go back to the organization in another job, they're going to be the best Java code people that you could ever hire. So that worked out really well. The other thing we did that was very different is, in our policy, we said if you find a high vulnerability or a medium vulnerability or weakness, you have so many days to develop a POAM, so many days to do this and do that. I said, no, that's not what we're going to do. If you find a defect, we fix it. We don't write a poem. We fix it. And a very quick example, it was go, no go Friday. We're going to deploy code on Sunday. We got a high finding on this particular jar file. The folder was encrypted with des. Yes, des. And said, this is not acceptable. So we had, one of the guys went in there, logged in, found the folder, took the contents of the folder, created a current encryption standard folder, put the contents in there, clapped his hands and said, okay, it's done. I turned to him and I said, okay, now do a ticket for that. Because in Agile, the work trumps the paperwork. You do the work first, then you document what you did to fix the problem. And we expanded that to be in all of our environmental scans. Our team had the ability to run Guardium, Nessus, Tripwire, Forescout, all these scans. And if we found anything, and this happened a couple times a week, then we immediately fixed it. And so for 2.5 years in that program, I'm pat myself on the back, we carried no security POAMs and had no security RBDs, which was just totally blew people away. And that's been a great success story here at IRS. And I think the daily code scans should be just industry best practice for everybody. But anyway.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. Let's hear from Tyler next.
I had some initial remarks on the topic, but now after listening to everyone, they've kind of changed a little bit because there's been so much good information that's been tossed around. But I think it really starts, and you heard it from everyone here, right? DevOps or Agile really starts with people, process, and technology, and you sub tools in for technology. And you heard everyone hit on each one of those topics throughout this, right? But I think where it really begins for most agencies and teams in general, right? Even myself, when I'm working on at-home projects and things like that, is coming up with what is your definition of deployable? So what does it mean to have a deployable candidate? And that's your bar to begin. So now that I have that definition, now I need to assess my people, my processes, and my technology and understand gaps where that's not addressing the deployable nature of my definition for my agency. Now I can dissect that down into pockets of where is it automated, where is it not, how can I bridge those different divides? And then you heard something throughout this, which was shift left, and you'll hear every single DevOps discussion, which is shift left, shift left, shift left. And Stephen mentioned a lot of tools that people just bolt on to pipelines as a part of this automation effort in order to bring security into the front of a continuous ATO methodology. And really what Stephen said, I really liked, because I think it's less of let's lob tools at developers like code scanning tools or defect detection tools or whatever that may be in a scanner. And it's more about moving the inflection point of go or no go, just like Stephen mentioned. Let's move that point further into the development cycle. It doesn't mean I want to add or create more noise for my developers. I don't want them to be overwhelmed with scan results, but I want them to have actionable data that, again, maps back to what my definition of deployable is. And I want them to know that as soon as possible. So as soon as they are armed with that information and you can automate the delivery of that data to them, all of a sudden now we're building on the blocks of what it means to get to a state of continuous ATO.
Awesome. Thank you all so much for those insights. I want to call for a poll real quick, and we'll get that up on the screen here in a second. But what is the biggest challenge that federal agencies are facing with the ATO process? So please take a moment to respond to that. Ida, I would love to hear from you next. I have a new question for you, but if you could have a magic wand in your hand and you could wave your magic wand and eliminate the biggest friction point for achieving continuous ATO, what would that be? And you're on mute.
I have several points. One point is just the proliferation of controls and the evidence that it takes to validate the controls. Some of our systems are HVA systems with multiple overlays. So that's just adds to the level of controls we have to deliver for a system. Also, as we implement and venture down the SaaS journey, as you know, to promote the cloud first, one of the unintended consequences of SaaS versus having an on-prem solution is now I have to look at FedRAMP and get the CRM to say what controls I need to implement. For instance, if I had a productivity system and we was on-prem, email was just part of my on-prem boundary. I did not have to do a separate assessment in ATO for that. So I think that's one of the unintended consequences that most people do not really address is that instead of moving away from ATOs, we're adding more and more ATOs on the conundrum. And as we approach the ATO season, uh, one of the things I listened to, I think it was Trevor, and as they were talking about DevSecOps. Well, DevSecOps is really going to address the controls pretty much I need for an application or how I get something out. So I have to look at things in its totality. So what I have to do and what I've been doing is considering, okay, these are, if I look at things as an old methodology from bases and towers, I can put applications and I can deliver these applications as bases and different items. But when I go to ATO, there's a lot more controls that I have to be fundamentally concerned with. So some of the controls we can automate through a automation process, and some of the controls lends themselves more toward quantitative and qualitative. So we start making that separation. If I can easily get the quantitative information, more of the technical controls, I can use those and I can have more automation producing the results I need. But some of the controls are more subjective in nature. And just because you provide a some answer or response, I should say, does not mean you're really answering the question. So if I have to, let's say we're doing a policy, right? And then there's different requirements that you have to put into the section for a policy. I can't just say because you answered all the questions, you now have delivered the policy. Someone has to look at that policy and make a quantitative judgment. Is what you've documented meeting the results of what the policy should be? So what we're trying to do is figure out how we can move more of our answers to the quantitative side and start reducing the qualitative side, or spread out the qualitative side to enhance more of these applications that we're churning through our cycle. Because the ATO is just not, what the DevOps is presenting. It's a full set of controls that need to be answered to get the ATO for our system.
Thank you, Ida. Ian, do you have anything that you would like to add?
Yes, definitely. With all the talk, I can completely agree with Lanya that one of the biggest things is definitely, upskilling that workforce. A lot of times I see, whether it be somebody coming in to assess the ATO or somebody that's in a position that's been there for a while, they really don't understand when you start talking about DevSecOps or something new. And then if they're within, this development life cycle, they'll get something, do whatever they have to do, and then they send it back. One of the things that I try to tell, a lot of my team members, and, hopefully kind of make an impression on, some that are watching, that, take some time out of your day to, if you're a developer and you go hand something off to, the cybersecurity person, ask them, hey, can I sit down? Can I watch what your process is, or what tools you use, why you come back with 1,000 vulnerabilities every time? I think that's the real idea of shift left. Kind of not, some people are worried that their jobs are going to go away because it's all going to the developer. But it's really that shift left of the knowledge, that viewability across the entire life cycle, to really understand that, yes, when I do submit my code and the vulnerabilities come back, these are the reasons why. it's going up to that, ATO level. And that's where the continuous, at least for us, the continuous ATO comes into play for my organization is, how do we give, everyone the tools or even the processes to get as close to, a continuous ATO to where, it's not getting to a point where stuff's, being thrown back and we're missing the mark. Going back to a little bit of the first question I was asked, when is it critical to really, get out products within the Navy? If you're putting out a product that's going to go on a ship or is something that's on a ship, it's not you create it and you just hand it off to the ship and everything's good to go. We have, the maintenance schedules. You miss that maintenance window for a ship, and then, maybe 3 to 4 years later, you'll hit another maintenance window to get it out there. So it's really critical to, especially when coming to a continuous ATO, to understand, what skills your workforce has, what skills your workforce lacks, and like Tyler said, what is that definition of deployment, or what is being delivered, and understanding what is the cycle that it's being delivered on. If you're in something like the Navy where you have to hit the mark, otherwise 3 or 4 years later that you'll finally get your chance again.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ian. I'm going to go ahead and ask for our second poll to be put up on the screen, please. And the poll is going to say, are software factories like Platform One helping to accelerate the ATO process on programs? So please take a moment to respond to that. Tyler, go ahead.
Yeah, I just had a kind of a question, I guess, for our panelists today, because Ian said something really interesting in that, which I think is really important, which is some people feel like DevOps is shifting significance away from their role or what they do in the organization inside the software delivery lifecycle. And you mentioned kind of guiding some of the DevOps teams in your practice. And then Ida, you also mentioned that not everything can just be data-driven. Some of it's a little bit subjective, right? So I'm curious, have you all had success? And where I've seen really mature DevOps practices have a lot of success is embedding cyber SMEs and experts really early on in the development process, not necessarily of I'm committing code to my application, but more to my automation pipelines and more to the controls around how developer code is processed. So I'd really like to, I don't want to derail from our next topic, but I'd really like to hear, like, is that working for you all? Is it not? Because if you look at the paper produced by NIST on the benefits of DevOps, 3 of the 4 are about mitigation of vulnerabilities, but the 4th one is reduction of friction between security teams and development teams. So I think it's really an interesting point that Ian brought up, which is like, we're not trying to replace you. We actually want to give you more significance earlier on in the delivery lifecycle. You're a critical part to how we build anything.
Yeah. Trevor, I see your hand raised.
Yeah, I really love that question, and I really enjoy being part of those scenarios and experiences when actually out in the field or in the agencies. I was on a very large project, which was the Consular Modernization Initiative, so online passport. I was in the early phases of architecture, and every major federal program is at least 3 years before you can really hit the ground running, right? First year is architecture, acquisitions, procurement. The second year is, are we covering our bases, doing those checkboxes legally? Have we secured the funding? Third year is, let's hit the ground running. We have our tools, let's implement. I had found that the security teams were not either participating as a stakeholder out of choice or because it was intimidating, or they simply were not invited. So, but we had selected such tools where we accounted for a lot of these roles. People specialize in tech writing, they specialize in process improvement, they may not specialize in actually writing code. So the tools we had selected gave an opportunity to bring in those security people that actually helped with categorization, control selection, and actually writing the control statements to go into our applications, which were not just human readable, but machine ingestible, and actually just be part of us having that developer experience. And to a point Stephen had brought up earlier, it did become a fun game of how fast can we do this? How accurately can we do this? that was a very unique situation where we did have the buy-in across multiple teams and contracts to be able to participate in that sort of fashion. I don't imagine that happens everywhere, but I was very happy, and I'm happy to share this story that there can be success out there for this.
Thanks, Trevor. Let's go Lanye and then Ida.
Yes, and great question, Tyler. I think that is probably one of the biggest issues that I've seen, really when you're down at the program office. And it was actually eye-opening for me because I had started, you know, once you keep going in your career, and then I got up and I was doing more strategic and at the strategic level. But once I put these policies that we all think are amazing as we're writing them on paper, right? But implementing them is a totally different situation. And I think once I did some work on the program side, implementing these processes, especially around cATO and just streamlining RMF in general, the one of the main issues that I saw truly is around personnel. And a lot of it is not necessarily that the cyber folks feel that they're being left out. I think there's a lack of understanding, which means there's a lack of confidence, and there's the lack of the ability to speak up in certain situations because they don't understand code. We want to push them to the left, but we haven't trained them to be at the left, right? So I think what has worked, what I've seen work very well. I support an individual and Danny Holtzman. He originally started off at the Cloud and DevSecOps AO for the Air Force, and I've worked with him through many programs. But I have to say that, I've worked through a lot of AOs. Like, his methodology is one I've really seen work. And what the difference is, it forces conversation. So it's not only just saying on paper, I'm going to integrate you. It's deep dives where everyone is there. We host a lot of different integrated product teams that include the cyber, and when we say cyber, I mean all of cyber. I mean the ISMs, who's responsible for the systems. I mean the security control assessors, who's going to assess it, including the AO staff, but also including the developers and the operators. And so I think that we saw a lot of movement, that it helps the process move quickly. Versus just trying to the cyber people, I got you. It's more so like, hey, developers, this is what I will be looking for. And so that's the way to kind of get them to the left, even if they don't understand the speak, talking to them up front about this is the intent of what we're looking for. I think real success there. We saw that across multiple programs, some aircraft programs that he does, but it really boiled down to doing deep dives to actually understanding. Not, we talk about the vulnerabilities and I have this high risk, but do we really understand the intent? Like, put it in an operational context. So instead of saying you have all these high risks, okay, if it's a high risk, but it's only a high risk for 30 seconds when the aircraft is 50,000 feet above the air, how high is this risk, right? And should we stop that? Should we stop these systems from getting authorization because of that? So it's not only understanding the actual vulnerabilities and the controls, it's really understanding the mission and the operator, and and then once we understand that, now those authorizing officials have to make decisions that's not only based on control, right? It's also based on mission. It's based on the operations. And sometimes a high risk is going to be, acceptable in certain cases. And so I think starting to have those real business decision conversations around cyber versus just controls is really what's going to continue to push the needle.
Yeah, thank you. Ida, go ahead.
I could say within our organization, the CIO basically organized our organization around cyber. So we have a cyber lead, applications lead, development, and operations lead. So we mirror the DevSecOps, and we're involved in pretty much all of the projects that are going on. So much so that we're starting to push back. Okay, we have operations, we have CDM, we have a lot of other things that not applications that we need to be involved in. One of the things I saw also is just some of the opposite. The security people were so involved. I get pushback from the developers. It's like, wait a minute, we don't want to hear about all these requirements. We want to go and build these elegant solutions. And so, we're having to navigate that that yes, you can build elegant solutions, but they're not going to pass, and you're not going to get the opportunity to let everybody see how elegant you code it. So we're having these discussions, and one of the ways we are, like I said, we're solving some of these issues is to move the controls that they don't need to be concerned about, moving those out of the picture. So you don't see the management controls, you don't see the PM controls, you don't see certain controls, and you focus on what it is that you need to work with to deliver the project. And it's still a work in progress, but that's the path we're going down.
Yeah, thank you. I'm going to call for poll 3 now, our last poll. Are AOs comfortable with the reciprocity that comes with accredited processes and underlying DevSecOps infrastructure? So that's our last poll question. Please respond to that. And in the last 15 minutes, let's kind of dig into some of these audience questions and see if we got them answered. So it looks like Quentin wrote in asking, how does the update of the NIST 800-218 affect the ATO process now? Does anyone want to throw their hand up and respond to this with some of their thoughts for Quentin? Ida, is your hand still up from the last one, or you want to respond?
Yes. Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, he's asking, how does the update from the NIST 800-218 affect the ATO process now?
We're still churning. I was going to say, we really haven't, I guess, gotten the current process to where we want it to be. So we're still churning through that and putting some of the roles, in place. And it's a very difficult process when you're dealing with people who are not steeped in cybersecurity, and just trying to get them to understand the basics of it. I guess I probably had to let someone else who's actually have gotten their processes more mature than what we have speak to that.
Sure. Is there anyone else in the panel who would like to weigh in? Tyler?
Yeah, I guess I just have a couple of thoughts on kind of the update to it. A lot of the update was around proving out the security of your software supply chain, proving that clean chain of custody, validating not only that the scans and checks and testing is occurring inside of your CI pipelines, but what I really kind of derived from this was making sure that you're independently validating this before it becomes deployed as well, right? It's one thing for a developer or even a security team to write these into an automated framework on the front end, on the far left of the life cycle, but being able to verify it and validate it before it goes into production, because it's not incredibly difficult to trick a scanning tool, making sure that that's a part of it as well is really, really important. And then the second portion, if I remember it correctly, is really all about mitigation of vulnerabilities. And this is a huge core tenet to every agile DevSecOps practice, which is great, you're automating everything out the wazoo, whether it be software binaries, infrastructure, data workflows, whatever it may be. But it's critically important that you're not just automating the delivery of this or the build out of it, but you're also automating intelligence back to the developers, because inevitably there will be some sort of remediation that has to happen, whether it's the correction of incorrect test or vulnerability that's popped up as a high. And to Lanya's point earlier, a huge portion of this is stack ranking those vulnerabilities, because scanners don't have that context, which is where all of our cyber professionals really come in, which is to really assess the impact of a vulnerability and where it should be prioritized in that feedback loop to the developers. So making sure that you have that connection throughout the entire software delivery lifecycle that gives you a path to remediate, right? And this is one of those DORA standards, MTTR. It's something that's sort of the measuring stick as to how mature you are in your agile practice.
Thank you, Tyler. And Trevor, let's hear from you next.
Sure. So full disclosure, I'm that person that has read the entire risk management framework 837 at least 8 times between 2019 and 20 on a USDA project that was mentioned. That is not a lie. I look at the SSDF, Secure Software Development Framework, a little bit differently. I look at this as another resource I can use to ask questions during evaluations of solutions, products, or even during my analysis of alternatives. Industry is able to come to my branch capacity building and sign up for a vendor pitch that is on CISA.gov in our division area within our branch. And so I see the SSDF as an opportunity to ask those vendors questions as, how will you help me achieve these objectives and better align to these requirements that have just become part of my program? And so I get a lot of, I really take it as a different spin. I like to differentiate cybersecurity, which we're really good at, from IT security, which we could be better at, as in all those steps that have to happen before we get to cybersecurity.
Thank you. And oh, go ahead, Ida.
I was just going to add, one of the challenges that's, answer my question, we having to deal with a partner vendor who built their system around 800.171, and we pretty much use 853. So there was a lot of challenge in dealing with our partner, and even just in these languages speaking, some of the controls absolutely do not match. One of the things we found out that they were doing self-assessments, and we had never considered that as a acceptable process of doing self-assessments. Like I said, we have high systems, we have HVA systems, so we always had independent assessors. And so we're having to come back in and think, who we deal with and who gets the data. And a lot of the things that we never considered before, we're having to consider, particularly if we're dealing with people or companies that are using the 800.171 as their framework instead of the 853.
Yeah, thank you, Ida. And Lanya, let's hear from you.
I actually, first, Trevor, I definitely feel your pain, and you know that you can imagine how many times I've read that document. But I'm one of the crazy people that love it, that love reading all of NIST documents. I love creating framework. It is like literally my crazy geeky passion. I really actually enjoyed it, and I actually used it as a framework. So when we went into speaking of like cloud and DevSecOps and cATO, I think I mentioned that, I helped the AO develop how we would that in his. What I did was use the secure software development framework that NIST came out with, and I did that to develop. Actually impressed with how people use the ConOps, because if you look at it high level, again, it's a framework. How do I prepare my?
I think is it just me, or are you guys not able to hear Lanya anymore?
I couldn't hear her. She was freezing.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
I think there might be a little bit of a connection issue.
Am I still frozen?
You're kind of back. Try again.
Well, I hope I didn't frozen in like a situation.
Sound is
back.
It's like very on and off. You look great though. It keeps freezing at great spots for you.
Oh, I can appreciate.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Lanya. I think we've lost you.
Oh man.
But if you're able to jump back in, then we'll hear from you on that. But is there any other comments from the panelists before we end with our wrap up segment? Steve.
Real quick. I just want to. I think there was a mention about the scanning tools and how you can have greater or lesser confidence. One thing I note, that if you go to OWASP and you are an OWASP geek like I am, you understand that when these tools give you these results, they're called a base score for a reason. The base score doesn't contain the environmental metrics. It doesn't contain the temporal metrics of what that risk, what the true true profile of that risk is. So your folks need to become very familiar with that scoring calculator, understand their environment enough that they know how to apply the environmental and temporal metrics to actually understand what the risk really is. That's it.
Awesome. Thank you. And she's back. Lanye, did you want to finish your thought there?
All I know is I was saying something amazing.
Okay, we got it recorded.
No, but I was saying was I actually love, I don't know how much you heard, so I don't want to reiterate everything, but I was saying in general, I love getting access to the newness frameworks. And I think this one in particular, I did use actually very heavy. I mentioned that I created a ConOps for cloud and DevSecOps, but really I used the foundation of this particular framework in order to do that. Because when you look at it as a framework, high level, we're talking about how do you prepare the organization? How are you protecting software? How do you make sure that you have well-sourced software and then responding to vulnerabilities? High level, you can use that as a framework for pretty much anything, right? And so I use that to develop I don't like to say checklist because checklists get a really bad name. So let me say a guide in the checklist format. Because I know that checklists get a bad name, but we have to think all of these smart folks that's on this panel, that's not, and I'm not saying folks are not smart, but that's not always the case. Some of the individuals that's implemented, they do need guidance. They do need checklists. They do need some information to help guide them. But I think changing the thought of a checklist, you have to answer 1 through 10 to a guide and providing, additional information within the checklist to kind of guide some of our maybe less knowledgeable or novice folks that's working on the systems is important. So I am a fan of, I'm actually a fan of 213. So.
Yeah, thank you. All right, 30 seconds or less. What is your final thought or words of encouragement or inspiration that you want to leave our audience with? Starting with Ian.
Yes. So, when it pertains to cATO, the way I see this kind of shaping out, especially for the Navy, I look at it in the sense of, you take a company like John Deere. They're going to, put out an excavator for heavy construction, and they're also putting out lawnmowers for people's front yards. Are you going to take the lawnmower and put it through the same process and certifications that an excavator is going to go through? Well, the first one is going to fail that it can't, dig into the ground. So, for the Navy, we have so many different things. We have, the networks. We have, whole mechanical and electrical. We have weapon systems, combat systems. So I see it that when it comes to cATO, we're really, as the entire Navy, going to have to really come together and separate out these different components and have them go through their own processes. The hard part is a lot of the warfare, centers all work on these different components at some point. So really trying to break that out and understand where they're going to go to get to those cATO processes, where they're actually going to get certified to go to, whether it be the ship or onshore or whatever it is. But yeah, taking a survey of what you have, what processes do you really want it to go through to get certified, and how does your products or your systems fit into those different processes that you're going to have to create.
Thank you, Ian. And Ida, 30 seconds or less. Let's hear from you.
Sure. The way I look at it is we're going to have to make sure that for us is that we've segmented what we consider the qualitative processes versus the quantitative. And they may be on separate ATO paths in order to clear the process for applications being delivered faster. We have already embedded some of our SOC security teams inside the DevSecOps, and now we're going to have to embed some of our SOC people and also to to do the initial setup and train the application developers that's going to run the security tools. We'll have to take that time to do that investment of the security tools and make sure that that information is over there also.
Thanks, Ida. And Steve, your turn.
So first, I would just like to say thank you very much for this this really neat experience. I think part of the big value of all of these panels is the collaboration that can grow out of these meetings. And I would say that, you know, anybody that wants to reach out to me, I think you have my email address, that's on the panel, or the folks that are participating, please reach out. I've got a couple of collaborative efforts with Social Security, starting one up with Securities Exchange Commission. And, you know, I just love to hear from you guys because you're all smart people. You've all seen similar business problems, and you come with your own kind of twist on how to solve those. And I believe there's a great deal of power in the joint brain trust. And remember, like Cory Doctorow, a great author, if you haven't read him, you need to read him. Security is a team sport. Team sport.
Awesome. Thank you. And Trevor?
30 seconds or less. Okay, here we go. So I will say that where I am, our job is to shoulder some of the burden so that you all have the capacity to do the things that you want to do. And with the services that we provide or the frameworks that we put out, like we're working on software factories, we have the Kubernetes hardening guide, the cloud security technical reference architecture. I saw that we have Mr. Cloud Smart himself in the audience. So we have the Zero Trust Maturity Model, which works upon the automation strategies and acquiring the skilled workforce needed for achieving a lot of these continuous efforts. It was mentioned refreshing the skilled workforce as well. So we have the NICE framework, and there's just not enough good things to say about this, but providing those control mapping and training overlays to which knowledge, skills, and abilities are needed per role. We recognize that, I guess a little over 30, we recognize that the value doesn't always come from the tools or the capabilities or the features, but actually meeting you where you are and working with you through these pain points and overcoming these challenges. So we are here for you.
Thank you. And Lanya, your turn.
Yes. First, I think I want to ditto Stephen on just collaboration. I think that's the biggest thing. I think as a community, that number one, we've been seeing it. This is the most collaboration I've seen kind of around cyber ever. And I think it's working. I think we have to collaborate. We're collaborating with, CloudBees. You need those vendors that's on the outside, those industry-based vendors that are very forward-leaning, plus the vendors that's used to working in the DIB and the defense industry. You need those type of vendors to collaborate to bring solutions when you're talking about big Department of Defense type of solutions. So collaboration from that standpoint, from an organizational standpoint, I do, and this may be a harsh message, I think that we have to do a better job of holding people accountable. And what I mean by that is when we're bringing these and I am a contractor, so I'm referring to even myself, but as the government, when we're going out and we're sourcing these folks, whether they're cloud providers, whoever they are, whether they're developers, you have to hold them accountable, which means you have to understand the contracting language, and those things have to be included in contracts. When I hear things like when we have all these controls and all these layers, your hosting environment should be able to give you inheritance, and you should, hold them to that, right? So I think, holding people, organizations, and companies accountable to what they're supposed to deliver when it comes to ensuring that that our data is safe is really important. And the other piece, we have to look at the workforce from a financial standpoint. Don't want to keep back to that, but it truly is important. I'm seeing a lack of the right folks, even in leadership of the government. And so when I mean not only financial, but just our culture, what needs to change here when it comes to cATO, it truly is a cultural shift. We continue to talk about moving left, but we really let compliance hold us up. And that cultural shift really truly is going to come, from the top down, but also from the bottom up. But we really have to work on that.
Yeah, thank you. And we'll end with Tyler, of course.
I just want to say thank you to everyone who took time out to listen to us. Special thanks to the panelists. I do this every single day, talking to government programs and shared services groups about the progress. And I think as many of us have experienced, this is somewhat painful at times. It's not without bumps and bruises to transform from legacy systems. So coming here and hearing stories like Stephen talking about web apps, it's a shot in the arm to know that like we are moving in the right direction. You build champions in really small pockets of automation, no matter what methodology or whatever tools you're using. Right now, Stephen is a massive advocate for agile practice and DevOps, no matter where he goes. So think about that. Don't try to bite the entire apple, right? Take it bit by bit, build those champions and kind of move forward. And I guess my last point would be, please reach out anytime. And just like you've heard throughout this, and as I kind of mentioned in the beginning, start with your definition of deployable. Each program, each application set, it's uniquely different. You're building a space system, you're building a front-end site for the taxpayer. Get that definition, and then let's build the framework of automation around it.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much. And of course, our partners at CloudBees for making this possible. And thank you all at home for joining us and sticking around. Our next event will be up on the screen here shortly. Oh, it's part of our quantum speaker series. So join us for an overview of the Center of Quantum Technologies on May 16th. And if you'd like to receive your CP credit for this event, go ahead and take your last poll question, just yes or no. But with that, everyone, have a great rest of your week. It's truly been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.